Let's talk about food. One thing we found, and the kids love this, in Greece, they love waffles and pancakes. They love them so much, they have them for dessert. So when we woke up the first day and we traveled around and we were looking for a breakfast place, which you have to know in Europe, people sleep in. So places do not open until later. It's usually about 10 a.m. And for us, we're early risers, and we also like to eat dinner around 5, so we can get the kids to bed around like 8, 9, and not possible in Europe, but you just gotta switch your plans. So you gotta be flexible. So we were walking around, touring, and we found this beautiful rooftop garden. We found a couple of these places, and it was this incredible
all in the
pancake,
area.
waffle place. The kids were thrilled, and we found that that was like their favorite thing everywhere. What were some of your favorite things, maybe even food, because you tried more food than me since I'm pregnant and I just didn't want it.
Yeah, I mean, they had the gyros where they just slice the lamb right off. They have this big meat twisting there, and they're just slicing the meat right off in there. And again, that Plaka area, it's kind of hilly underneath the Acropolis, and so people were just out dining just right on these staircases and these tiny little streets. And then we found again a couple of these places that had these rooftops where you had the whole view of the city and the Acropolis going. I mean, they make great pizza there as well. You'd think that it was invented in Greece as well, because that's the thing you'll notice when you go to Europe is the bread. It just digests differently because it's grown differently, and it doesn't have some of the the things that have been done to the American foods and all that stuff. So you're just gonna notice that you can eat and enjoy things that you normally may not enjoy, or your stomach doesn't enjoy as much back home.
Oh, this was a really funny way to start our trip, because it tricked all of our kids thinking that this is all of Europe, but it's not all of Europe, it's just Greece. So in Athens, there was a sign above our toilet that said, "Do not flush toilet paper." And you think toilet paper, toilet, and in the US we flush toilet paper, you just don't want to flush a bunch. But it literally said, "Throw away the toilet paper." And we're like, okay, it means like throw it away in the waste bin. And they really do mean that in all of Greece. And so our sweet 5-year-old, she kept going, "Will you help me go to the bathroom? I don't want to forget." Like, she kept saying, "I don't want to forget," because she sometimes would forget and put it in the toilet. But their sewage system is so old that even toilet paper can actually plug it up, which they definitely don't want. And the sewage system in Athens was really bad a long time ago. It's kind of like a valley, and so it even traps heat during the summer, and then with sewage, and it just not a pretty picture. But in all of Greece, they throw away the toilet paper. So fun little fact, even traveling outside of Greece, our kids, specifically our 5-year-old, kept thinking she had to throw away her toilet paper and she couldn't flush it down the toilet. So we were trying to unwork that after our time in Greece, since our first time in Athens. So that was a fun thing to encounter. So as Wayne was talking about, these little wristbands that we had with the kids, we actually met a friend. There were these 2 men who owned this restaurant with another rooftop garden. We went and visited them a couple times, because when you make relationships, you just love coming back, and they also love seeing your kids and getting to know you. And so our one friend, Apollo, he actually said, "I love that you have these wristbands on the kids," because he said, Greek drivers, and we didn't even know how Italian drivers drive, and no offense to Italians or Greeks out there, this is from our friend Apollo. But he said, Greek drivers are crazy drivers. They're worse than Italians. And so he says, you just don't know, because they're not looking. You just don't know if they're gonna fly around the corner. And we will talk about that more with some of our other journeys in Greece. But we learned that is very true.
And anywhere.
It was wonderful to hear that from a local right away, where we're like, oh, this is very helpful.
Yeah, and I think the kids, their favorite thing of Athens were the cats. There were a lot of stray cats. A lot of the people just feed the cats, because obviously when you have cats, it helps take care of any rodent problems. So cats come in very handy in that area. But I mean,
love cats in Athens.
Every time it was like every cat, like the 50th cat we would see it was like the first cat they saw. So it was super cute to just see them walking through, again, all these small little alleyways in different areas where there would be a tree planted or just a garden, and there would be another cat there that you could play with. So the kids just got to again, that Athens was just a perfect place to land with the kids and just have a peaceful big city, but also kind of felt small where we were because we could get around everywhere, like Bethany said.
Absolutely. So in Athens, it's good to have, probably your top things that you want to go visit. It's different than if Wayne and I were just traveling to Athens. We would travel very differently than with our kids. But if you have your top highlights, you can really kind of feel around the environment. How are the kids doing? How is the weather? What's entertaining them? Stopping, pit stop for a cat, pit stop for a drink. So it's just being flexible. But for us, our probably favorite thing was really learning the history of the Acropolis, the war that went on, how it was demolished, and how people didn't care. It was actually a storage place for gunpowder and all that, but now it's like left in these ruins instead of rebuilt, which is really cool because it just helps you understand the history and how history can actually be forgotten. And their history was forgotten, and it took until a much later time for someone to bring that history back and say, hey, here's what actually happened here. So that was really neat to learn the time frame, because I think in the US, which is a newer country, we also have a lot of that where history is forgotten. But as people, continue to press along, the history will come back and people will understand the meaning of it. So it is pretty neat to understand. And then our favorite was Mars Hill.
Yeah, Mars Hill, just, knowing that really the church was expanded in Greece. And Paul, when you go into the book of Acts, how he went to this, this place in Athens that was known for Socrates and Plato, Aristotle, all the philosophers and all the gods. And that's where they even had the statue to the unknown God. And Paul, makes reference to the unknown God, and basically really for the first time introduces Greece and, mainland Europe to the gospel, and the tidal wave that came from that, just from that one thing. As we went left Athens and went to other cities, we followed along the Acts story, which was great to take the kids on and have them experience from there. But it started really visiting Mars Hill.
Yeah, so I'll just add to that. One thing that we did for our older kids, when you're traveling with older kids, you can help them experience history a little bit differently, because we're not, they can learn about Greek mythology and all that stuff. Every single thing that you learn in history is actually tied back to God, believe it or not. And that's actually what Paul was teaching. You have a spot for the unknown God. Do you know why? Because there is a God, the God that you don't know, and you even made a place for him. And so we decided what would be most monumental, is not walking through the museums. We were actually staying right near the museum of the Acropolis, but that is just not going to be interesting to the kids. When they're older, maybe in their 20s, they're going to want to venture back and they're going to want to see that kind of stuff. But at this time in their life, it's more about experience. And one thing I can share with you, being a teacher in my prior days, is that if you can have kids experience the land, experience with their senses, their sight, their hearing, their taste, their touch, smell, experience that, and then teach them what happened there, the connections are something that will never be forgotten. Like, here's an example. If you took a kid on a roller coaster, and then later you teach them about gravity and physics, and you explain what they experience, they're gonna go, oh my gosh, that makes sense. And so that's what we were doing as we were traveling through and starting in Athens. The biggest thing that we could teach our kids is to think for themselves, and you learn to think for yourself when you understand history from the biblical perspective. It's not mom and dad telling them, here's what God says. It's them reading the Bible, experiencing it, and then hearing from God, this is what I did. This is what I'm doing. And so that's what we really helped them do. So as we traveled through different parts of Europe, specifically starting in Athens, we had them reading parts of Acts where Paul was preaching on Mars Hill and doing all these things, and then they got to be there and experience it, and it's almost mind-blowing where they're like, wow, there were temples all around to all these other gods that were monumental, Zeus, Aphrodite, all these things, and here he's speaking to all these philosophers, and only 2 listened to him, but those 2 who listened to him, it helped turn the tide of the whole culture throughout all of Greece. So really, really cool, and that's something that we helped them establish, and then they journaled their thoughts and experiences, and of course it's not as deep as we would, but that's where we have to give grace to, because they're growing in their understanding, and we want our kids to grow in what they're thinking again, not what we're telling them to think. So that's really key, and we feel like that alone could shift the culture of the generation of all these kids that are being raised up to learn how to think for themselves.